Hello and welcome back to the Beer Ladies podcast. I'm Thandi and I'll be playing host today along with my good friends Katie and Christina. And to close off on Women's History Month, we thought we'd have a conversation about branding and inclusivity. You've probably seen many an uproar on Twitter or Instagram when some brand releases a beer with sexist or misogynistic labels. Now, this happens fairly regularly, and we want to unpack what this means for women in the beer industry and women who love drinking beer. We also want to offer a few pointers on how to avoid getting your brand in hot water, basically how not to be an arsehole. So, before we get into the meat of the episode, let me remind you to please hit that subscribe button, both on the podcast app as well as on YouTube. And when you're done with that, please share this podcast with a friend. Choose your favorite episode so far and tell someone. All this stuff really helps us grow. All right, so let's find out what everybody's drinking. Katie, what you got?
Okay, so it's a school day tomorrow, so I'm going light. I have a St. Mel's Brewing Company Go On So.
Oh, your background is...
There we go. Go On So.
Oh, what style of beer is that now?
Oh, here. This is just a lager. And there's a hop. And from my research from this episode, I found that hops are the #1 theme to appear on beer labels.
That doesn't surprise me one bit, actually. Is it delicious? Do you love it?
I haven't tasted it. I've literally just poured it out.
Oh, wonderful. Let's hear some
smells
thoughts.
Nice and lagery, and it's what you need. Sunday afternoon.
Brilliant.
When we're recording it. It's really nice.
Excellent. Christina, what have you got, my friend?
So actually, I have a few beers left from the sort of Ladies Craft Beer Society craft beer community's crossover collab. And one of them is the Street Brewing Diversion Mixed Culture Lager, which just sounds like so exciting. And this took 10 months, I guess, to make. I mean, it's delicious, like all of their beers. I love their sours. They always do really exciting things. I'm here for everything. I don't think I have had a Wide Street Brewing beer that I don't like. I think they're all gorgeous. Sort of known for their wild and mixed fermentation, and I adore it. So I'm here for it. All of the Wide Street beers, awesome. Keep them coming.
I agree with you. I think their beers are really, really good. All right, and tonight, what I've got a Guinness, a good old fashioned Guinness in a can. I've got some left over from Paddy's Day, so that was me being well lazy and actually just enjoying it. It's also super easy. Nothing wrong with a good old Guinness, especially since they brought the widgets back. So now they're nice.
Oh, they brought them back?
Yeah. I think
I didn't know they were back.
Temporary shortage. Okay. I think it was a temporary shortage. They're definitely back. Oh gosh. Okay, ladies. Well, let's get into branding. Let's get into sexism. Let's get into how this affects everybody in the beer land. I want to set the scene a little bit. So I think it was this very month actually, during definitely the last few weeks, a couple of controversial things happened on Twitter and on Instagram. And the first one was an Irish brewery. They were releasing, I think, a Paddy's Day box, which those beers actually look kind of cool. But one of our Beer Ladies members, in fact, Hillary, pointed out that they have still got beers that effectively just have boobs all over them. And that started a bit of a Twitter debate and things going on. And it wasn't the first time either. It's actually the same branding, just reused for different beers that they use. And effectively, it's just tits on a can. And, what we obviously don't like about that is that it's completely objectifying women. But now, again, for context, not a day later, there was a new brand launched in the UK, seemingly with some Asian influences. They launched this bizarre sounding coconut beer for women, which, really just caused all sorts of chaos as well, because literally it's right there on the bottle or on the tin, beer for women. Now, these two examples are they're different from each other, as I think we can agree. The one is really just objectification and kind of looking at women as only a pair of tits. And the other one is saying that not all beer is for women, and that this one is. So, you know, if I had to kind of summarize this before going to Katie for more examples, you know, the brewery here tried to excuse their design, which was these hand-drawn boobs, saying that it was designed by a woman and it was designed to celebrate women. Both of these, of course, are utter bullshit, because, as we all know, women, as well as men, have got internalized misogyny, which just means that they don't always see the harm in what labels and things can do in terms of sexism. And also, you don't celebrate women by celebrating only their tits, and especially not on a milk stout. Come on, get some freaking tact. In the other case, the case of the UK brand, the brand new UK brand, which I think to this day only has 4 followers on Twitter, so that should tell you something. The problem is a little more subtle. So their excuse for releasing this coconut beer for women is that in many parts of the world, women are stigmatized for drinking beer. So they thought they'd make a beer, you know, in air quotes, for women, so that they could effectively drink in peace. Now, it seems like a really nice thought, you know, it seems like the right intentions, but everybody started questioning why it's for women, and, oh gosh, how would we ever know what beer to drink if nobody told us that we could drink beer, you know, for women, for men, for, you know, for whoever. Now, they responded back saying, no, this is to raise awareness, and it's obviously for all people and whatnot, but at the same time, they made this beer in a rose gold, sort of rosy tinted bottle. It's a smaller amount of beer. I think it's only 330 ml. It'll never go higher. It's low ABV. It's low carb. It's low calorie. So you tell me that this wasn't made for women, in air quotes. Now, the problem is that there is no such thing as beer for women. That, you know, that's the simple fact. There is no such thing. If we wanted to normalize women drinking beer, we should just do that, normalize it. Make sure that women drink beer in peace by letting them choose whatever fuck beer they want and letting them drink it in peace. If there are cultural stigmas attached in various countries, then there are other things that need to be done. But making a beer for women further divides a beer into his and hers. You know, remember there was a time even in Ireland that a woman couldn't get a beer in a pint glass, and apparently it's still done in some very backward rural towns, which is shameful. But it means that by putting beer for women onto a bottle or onto a can, it means that not everything else is for women. And that's the part that I personally have a problem with. And I think that they've completely missed the mark. But you know what? These are 2 cases that have come about recently, and we're not here to only discuss those, but these are 2 examples of 2 very different problems that that brands often, you know, or very different hot water kettles that brands find themselves in. And I wonder if these 2 are going to get out of it. But Katie, you've got some other examples of studies and beers that you were looking at, right?
Yeah. So shame on me, I'm drinking man beer and I'm not a man, you know?
How dare you drink a beer that's not for women?
I'm going to burn in hell for this or something. I don't know. But yeah, I was looking at studies, and I find a lot of beer research. This isn't necessarily, the first one isn't necessarily related to craft beer. It's related to the adverts on the Super Bowl, the beer adverts. So they would be from, you know, they're not craft, they're multinationals. We know who they are, I think. Mm-hmm. Where is it? And so they were like, how many of the ads portray men? How many of them, the ads have women in them? How are they portrayed? One of the really interesting things, if an ad had a voiceover, it was always male. So the study was conducted between, it was an impact of women in US Super Bowl beer commercials from 2011 to 2015. And it was done by the Southern Illinois University. So so of the ads that they checked, only so none of them, they were all voiced by men. And in the ads, they classified how the men and the women were sexualized or objectified And in of the 17 ads come with men, none of them were sexualized or objectified, whereas in 16 ads with women, 7 of the ads, women were sexualized or objectified in it. I was like, why do you do that? Why aren't men and women equal?
Color me not surprised.
I know. And then I was looking at another study, and this was based on a tap house in Philadelphia, I think, and there was 500 beer labels available at the International Tap House. They surveyed them, and of the 500 beer labels, 35 of the beer labels portrayed people.
Interesting.
Okay. And of the 35 labels, 21 referenced women, 13 referenced men, and 1 referenced both. And the study showed that where women were referenced, they were sexualized. Whereas men aren't. And they have such lovely names as a happy ending, or a pearl necklace, or there's a blonde beer with a blonde on her knees, and it says goes down easy.
Irish Town did. They had a big over a flyover with a plane that said Dublin Blonde goes down easy. So not even original, lads. I'm bored.
No, there was actually a brewery in South Africa too who did the same thing with a redhead and a blonde, and it was like the redhead gives good head or something, and I was like, what is this shit? Like, and they didn't even brew good beer. I mean, Yeah. Anyway, go on. Sorry, Katie, go on.
So this study on the tap house with the 500 beer labels, they also, what I found was really, really interesting is they also surveyed each of the servers. And it was a mix of genders, male and female. And they were like, of the people who buy the beers with the sexualized women on the labels, can you tell me a little bit about them or how you interact with them? And they found that those people wouldn't take, or they didn't like taking advice from women on beer, and they would question whether or not the women knew anything about the beer. Whereas if a male server told them the same thing, they would listen to the male server. So the type of people that buy the beers that sexualize women don't hold women in a very high regard, it would appear.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you want to market to those people, go ahead, but you're completely limiting your market. You're cutting out women from your market. And there was another study in Croatia, and this was done just on regular beer brands on the shelves in Croatia. And it was male and female respondents. It was 100 respondents from different age categories, different genders. And women are more attracted to, so it was the name of the beer was the number one thing that people went to. But when you drill down after that, women went for information. So maybe about the style of the beer or the ingredients of the beer, whereas men went for the pictures and the colors and things like this. So this wasn't craft. This was just generic beers that you find in Croatia on the shelves. And we'll link these studies in the show notes so that you can read them yourselves.
Yeah.
But I find it interesting. And I find that the fact that no women are doing voiceovers, it's like, men don't want to listen to women, or for beer anyway, for beer ads. Would you find a man?
It's not for women, Katie. I mean, didn't you catch the brief? No, that is pretty terrifying, and I think there is something to be said for maybe it's a correlation, maybe it's causation, probably not causation, but probably the correlation between the kinds of people buying that sort of beer where people are sexualized and objectified. If you are literally trying to market to those people and that's your brand message, then you've got bigger problems than just excluding people from your market. I mean, but that is going to be the obvious one.
Yeah. I have a study for that.
Excellent.
So there was a study in Sex Roles, the journal. And it's called "Does Sex Really Sell? Paradoxical Effects of Sexualization and Advertising on Product Attractiveness and Purchase Intentions." And so this was 4 researchers in Italy, and they examined how Italian men and women reacted to sexualized advertising. So I'm going to read sort of the results here, one of which is rather shocking. So women showed lower product attractiveness and purchase intentions towards products presented with sexualized female models than neutral ads. And this is also supported in fellow Beer Ladies podcast host Sarah's research says the same thing about millennial women in Ireland. Men were unaffected by ad sexualization. However, in study 3, they tested hostile sexism. So
what is hostile sexism, Christina?
How did they define it? I think they defined it basically as having objectified or sexist attitudes towards women, like sort of more blatantly.
Okay.
It would take me a minute to like look through the thing and say exactly how they said it, but we'll link all of these, and as we said in the show notes. But basically what they found is they found men with higher hostile sexism showed more purchase intentions after viewing female sexualized ads than neutral ads. So that would be your consumer group. And I really do want to be targeting that kind of people. And moreover, women's lowered consumer responses towards sexualized female ads were due to higher negative emotions. So when women see these, they're having really negative emotions about this. And men either don't really care, or the men that do care are not really the kind of people you really want drinking and representing your brand, I would imagine, unless you're particularly interested in hostile, sexist consumers, which I mean, I wouldn't imagine you would be. And before we kind of get too far away, I just want to mention that I want to go through actually a couple of studies, if I may, about why objectification is a problem. You know, we're not just sitting here and saying, oh, objectification is bad because we don't like it, which would be a completely reasonable response as well.
True.
But objectification, which dehumanizes women, especially when you see pictures with just boobs or just female body parts, it's really dehumanizing. It basically removes the idea of female agency within the product, which is why it's different if, say, like a female artist paints a picture of herself and it's nude, because she still has agency. She is expressing herself and she still owns that, versus using parts and pieces or male gazy images of women on advertising. So sexually objectified images of women have been identified by many scholars as encouraging sexual assault. So I have a study here, men's objectifying media consumption, objectification of women, and attitudes supportive of violence against women. And this was in the Archives of Sexual Behavior. So basically, these researchers wanted to examine why portrayals that do not feature sexual assault should affect men's attitudes supportive of violence against women. So this study proposed that the more men are exposed to objectifying depictions, the more they will think of women as entities that exist for men's sexual gratification, and that this dehumanized perspective on women may then be used to inform attitudes regarding sexual violence against women. So the data were gathered from collegiate men sexually attracted to women, consistent with the expectations associations between men's exposure to objectifying media and attitudes supportive of violence against women were mediated by their notions of women as sex objects. Specifically, frequency of exposure to men's lifestyle magazines that objectify women, reality TV programs that objectify women, and pornography predicted more objectified cognitions about women, which in turn predicted stronger attitudes supportive of violence against women. And this is one of many studies, the role of interpersonal sexual objectification and heterosexual intimate partner violence from perspectives of perceivers and targets. And again, sexual objectification is a subtle manifestation of sexist discrimination and violence against women that involves seeing and treating women as sex objects of male sexual desire. And again, the study, which included 165 heterosexual men, demonstrated a link between the general sexual objectification, perpetration, and psychological and physical intimate partner violence. Moreover, the relation between men's perpetration of objectification and intimate partner violence was mediated by ascriptions of humanity and empathetic concern towards our female partner. Results of both studies demonstrated that the effect of sexual objectification as target or perpetrator on global intimate partner violence, and explain the different psychological mechanisms through which it takes place depending on gender perspective. And I have a whole load of these. Honestly, just if you want to be depressed for a day, just Google objectification in advertising and links to rape, domestic violence. There's also self-objectification. So when women see sexualized objectifying versions of women in advertising as well, they objectify themselves. This leads to depression, eating disorders, all this other stuff. Honestly, this is incredibly depressing.
Yeah.
And very, very prevalent. So this isn't just this is a representation of a much bigger issue.
Yes.
And objectification is dangerous. And not just in beer, but period, it is dangerous.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say there, Christina, because on the one hand, this isn't like, hey, we don't like this, it makes us feel like shit, or whatever the case is. That's while that may or may not be valid, and it is, but I mean, while it's got actual ramifications, and there are actual studies for it, and it's not just beer, it's objectification in general. So lack of representation, lack of proper representation of people as full humans rather than just body parts. Just showing a vulva or just showing boobs does not a human make. Yeah.
There's also attitudes. So the EU did a study of male attitudes towards women, and they studied 1,000 men in each country. And though the statistic that I found shocking is that 7% of male respondents in Ireland think that a woman walking alone at night is fair game.
Jesus.
That means 70 people who responded, men who responded of the 1,000, thought that was okay.
We've just
that's
seen
the ones
that
admit it.
Yes, that's the ones that admit it
Yeah.
too. I mean, let's assume the best, and those are the only people who think it are the ones that admitted it. Probably not the case, but I mean, that's horrifying.
Well, yeah. There's a study here that says sexual objectification increases rape victim blame and decreases perceived suffering.
Yeah.
Like it is across the board harmful. There's no negotiation with this.
Yeah.
You cannot justify this to me. There's just absolutely no justification for this behavior.
What I found interesting with some of the things that you just said there, Christina, was that people will objectify themselves as well. So, you'll often hear women saying, oh, well, she was wearing skimpy clothes and therefore she contributed to her own rape, or whatever the case is. Now, obviously, we know that is not true and not okay. But what I think is really confusing for a lot of people is that if women say it, surely it must be true, as if all women speak for all women. Now, to be fair, we're here, 3 women on a podcast, saying, oi, listen to us, like we know a thing or two about marketing, marketing in a way that appeals to women, or whatever the case is. And, everybody here can sit and say, well, you're just now telling us not to listen to all women. But I urge you to think about where it comes from. So a woman who says that a person who was raped was in some or other reason at fault for this is not a person you should be listening to about things. A person who says that, sure, it's just a bit of fun, put some tits on a can, they're not really people who understand the links between what they're saying and what the ramifications are. So, this is not some brigade of bra burning, fire wielding, badass feminist people who hate men. No. This is concern, as far as I'm concerned anyway, this is concern for humans of more female sort of variety to be included in society in the respectful way that men are included. That's it. It's not about superiority. It's actually just about equality. You don't see men going through the same things. And what is the correlation again? There is no real advertising or branding in this case that objectifies men.
And equally, before we sort of continue on, I want to mention that this process, as an intersectional feminist, manifests differently for women of color. And I think we really need to understand that there are double intersections here when we're talking of women of color. And I would encourage you to read Karen Cruz, Writing Against Food-Based Aesthetics of Objectification, the work of Judith Ortiz Cofer. And she considered the ways in which racist and sexist representations permeate cultural imagery, especially how it relates to food. So I'll give you an excerpt. The patriarchal cultural tradition, specifically a system of representation that intimately associates women with with comestibles, is a system of practices that frequently figures women metonomically and metaphorically as food. This results in a subsequent fetishizing that negates women's status as fully human and reduces them to objects. This process of gendered fetishizing becomes even more pronounced when applied to women of color. One area that has and continues to make this association is, in fact, the advertising industry that makes producing and reproducing identities strong use of aesthetics of objectification. So we really need to also understand that this objectification manifests differently for women of color, for white women. Also, there's also classism to consider here, and not even to mention our LGBTQ plus brothers, sisters, and siblings. So we really need to kind of consider all of these sort of avenues when we're talking about, but specifically today we are focusing on sexual objectification of women. But this does represent differently for different women.
So on the one hand, there is a clear link between sexist and misogynistic branding and things like rape, sexual assault, and thinking that women are fair game when they're just walking home. Fuck's sakes, she was just walking home, guys. Okay, anyway, let's not get to Sarah. But on the other hand, there is also an economic thing to this, as in, if you are using sexist branding and you're thinking, sure, whatever, my target market is men, you are fundamentally excluding at least 50% of your market. And I'm not just saying the market who will be drinking your beer, but who will be buying your beer, because women in many countries, Ireland is no different, but women in many countries do a lot, if not the majority, of grocery shopping. And like, do you guys think that you'd be buying your husband's, if you didn't drink beer, but if you were going to be buying your husband's beer, or your boyfriend's or your girlfriend's, I mean, are you going to be buying beer that looks neutral and interesting, but descriptive and something that you want to try? Or do you think you're going to buy something that puts tits on a can? Because I'll go for the former myself.
I think you know the answer already to that, right?
Yeah. I mean, absolutely not.
And that's just it, is that, if you're really not going to consider the fact that it's bad people who hurt women, and that there's a correlation between objectification and those bad people who hurt women, at least consider the economic value of what you're doing. And the point is also that you don't even have to try and make respectful things about women. It's that you just stay away from putting bloody women on tins. Like, could we just stay away from it? Unless there is some really wicked, valid story, and it's done in a respectful way. Like, how unoriginal must you be to put a red-haired woman on a red ale beer, or a blonde-haired woman on a blonde ale? Fire whoever's doing that. Honestly, stick to making beer and let somebody else design the labels and the names, because besides being wrong and hurtful, it's so boring. It's so boring, and I'd almost die of boredom before buying any of these beers anyway. Very uninteresting.
I hear you.
Yeah,
I'm with
absolutely.
you.
It's boring. Like, and there are breweries that do really good jobs of putting women on cans, but it's because it's some sort of really important myth. I've seen some really interesting ones about Irish goddesses put on cans, but they're not sexualized. They're looking like strong, amazing, badass women as they are. And I really support that. So you absolutely can do it. You just have to be smart about it.
Yes.
And it's just not that hard. And to be kind of a bit fierce about this, it's 2021. We've been having this conversation for over a decade now. Like, there's just really no excuse for it. And at this point, if you're continuing to engage in this sort of objectifying behavior, you're doing it deliberately and you don't care. Yeah. And that's how I'm taking it. Like, it's honestly, like, at this point, you just don't care. And if you don't care about something that's really harmful, then that's a problem. And I can hear people in my mind going, well, Christina, it's in all advertising. Why aren't you talking about this in like car ads? Or why aren't you talking about this in other places? And I am. And that's what we're talking about now. We're talking about it in general. But the thing is that for example, the Irish craft brewing community is small. So we might actually be able to make a difference here if we keep talking about it. We might actually get, the people to change here. So that's why we keep talking about it. Whereas I am one of, 7 billion people that the car industry probably isn't that interested in. But, the small craft beer community here, we might actually get someone to change, because we have had someone change when we've had this conversation in the past. I have seen a brewery, I have talked to them, and they have changed. And now they're one of my favorite breweries, and I'm absolutely, I love their beer and I think it's wonderful. And I think that's the other thing. Like, I know I just said, well, you're doing it deliberately. Well, that's if you've been, had the conversation, you're still going, oh, I don't know. Yes, you do. Stop it. But
also the female demographic is the quickest growing demographic in beer. Like the male demographic for beer consumption has remained stagnant, whereas the female demographic is growing. So this is your new market. This is your new target audience. And you don't want to alienate them straight off the bat, because we remember things,
Yeah. And like I said, I think it's perfectly, I'm not here to say you can never make a mistake, because listen, that's not fair, because I make a million mistakes. And so when I'm saying I'm sort of like, there's no excuse for it, I mean, at this point, there's no excuse for defending it. Like, if you get called on it and the reaction should be, shit, I need to change this. We fucked up. The reaction shouldn't be like, oh, well, we did this. No, I don't want to hear all of these excuses that I don't really think that you believe either. Come on now.
Yeah.
Like, you need to own it, take accountability, and change it. And if you don't, then that tells me a whole lot about the fact that I don't really want anything to do with your brewery and I won't drink your beer.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting thing, because we don't want to ever be accused of trying to effectively, air quotes again, cancel brands, when effectively they're often making really nice, tasty beer. What we're really calling for in a lot of cases is a change of the branding. It's not a canceling. It's not taking the brand and making them shut down. That's a different thing. Now, obviously, if people don't change after a number of times when they've been called out, well, then, hey, they've lost my business. That's just it. But when people make mistakes and they apologize and they change it and they make an effort, then all is forgiven. That's what happens. That's how life works. That's how you treat your friends. So why wouldn't you treat your brewery that way? Come on.
Especially when it's such a small industry here, and I'm rooting for you. I'm like, what is that? I'm rooting for you. We were all rooting for you. And that's the thing. I want the small breweries in Ireland to succeed. I want them to do well.
Firstly, things can change. So people should be allowed a second chance, whatever the case is. But I think that does come with an acknowledgement that some wrong has been done. And it kind of brings me around to this idea of like, how might you know, if you're a brand or a brewery, how might you know if your design is probably not going to hit the mark? So, I mean, I'll put out my first clue. I think the first clue is if a bunch of the lads were sitting around drinking and you all thought it was like really funny, whatever you've called this beer or whatever the label is. Like if you've thought about your college days or whatever the case is, where this is almost like childish, immature humor that you're using, I'd probably say that's flag number one. Probably check it with some of your other friends when you're sober, like as to whether this is a good idea. Probably step number two is, if you're putting a woman onto your can, run it by your mother, maybe your mom, or maybe somebody who's potentially more conservative would have a slightly different view to yours. And don't look at somebody disagreeing with you as you being attacked. Like, people have got different opinions, and you're going to need to not only talk to one woman or one person, you're going to have to talk to many, but talk to people that are different from you, people who are more conservative or less conservative, people who are of different races, people who identify differently, gender-wise, sexually, whatever the case is. Try and find a diverse group of people that you can kind of run things by. If you can't find it naturally within your circles, pay for it. That's it. Pay for it. Pay for a focus group. Pay for that kind of research, or do what most do and stick to something completely neutral. You know, that's the easier, cheaper option.
And just to follow up on that, I would encourage you to Google the male gaze and make sure that it just eliminate any kind of branding that's male gaze. Just completely take that out. And also parts and pieces of women. So if you're just putting boobs on a can, you know, just don't do that. But be careful with legs as well. Like there are other like bits and pieces, you know, there are
that beer that was called the panty dropper. Oh my God. That was an awful, awful example. Sorry, go for it.
No. But like, you know, it's just women aren't pieces of things. And so that encourages objectification, which again, as we said, relates to this whole massive problem of, you know, rape culture and domestic violence and that kind of stuff. So, you know, don't do that. But I would really encourage, you know, brewers and breweries to read some of these studies and really understand the impact of what this is. And it's not just women getting upset about things. I think the first time I brought this up, someone told me that I was just having a tempest in a C cup, which was fucking charming. Thanks for that.
This is like the olden days where everything that women said was hysteria. It's the same thing, just with a different name. Because now if you speak out about something that's disrespectful, you're like some bra-burning bitch, or you're like a strong, independent woman said with sarcasm. And fuck that, actually.
No, like there's a lot of pressure on women to just be nice all the time. Like we have to be nice. Like I even found myself in this episode when I'm like, you know what, you should know better. And then I'm going back and I'm couching it. And it's like, oh yes, but you know, later if you change, I'll be open and forgive you. Well, you know what? Wow, I don't have to be nice about that. Like I don't have to be like, oh, you know, I can be like, you know what, this was fucked up. This was a fucked up thing you did, and you need to own that. Now you have, okay, we can move on, but you have to have accountability. Yeah. And we as women who are affected by this, by domestic violence or, you know, sexual assault survivors or that kind of stuff, you know, we are talking about things that have potentially played into our own assaults or our own experiences with street harassment or, you know, being groped or all sorts of things. And so it's not really on us to be nice all the time about this. And sometimes you're going to catch us on a bad day and it's just going to be like, you know what? I'm tired of this. And you know, you can't necessarily expect women to be nice about this all the time. Yeah. Because that's not fair to us either.
That's true.
But if you ask us for our opinion, we will be nice. We will tell you we don't like this or we like this, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. If you ask me prior to it, like going out in like a focus group, or you come to me and you want to talk about some branding and you're like, I'm not sure about this, then absolutely I will be nice to you. But if it is out there and when you're called on it, your response isn't shit, I need to change this, or, oh, we fucked up, then yeah, you're probably going to get a little bit of, okay, heat. Well, what? Yeah. You know, we're going to be a little bit like, what the fuck are you doing? What the fuck are you doing?
Yeah.
So there is a study called The Effect of Gender and Alcohol Placement in the Processing of Sexual Intent. And this is in the Drug and Alcohol Review. So from the abstract, they took 147 sexually experienced male and female participants who were shown a brief video of a social interaction between a man and woman, depicted with a bottle of water or alcohol. Participants were then asked to rate the female target and sexual intent. The study concluded that men inferred greater sexual intent compared to women and the female target when she was depicted with alcohol as compared to water. And thus they found that the association of a woman with alcohol suggesting sexual intent could have potential implications for advertising practice, which influences sexual beliefs toward women. And this is one of many studies, and including that men who have been drinking viewed their female companions as behaving in a more sexual manner than the women themselves reported. And these are just, we will link all these studies. So you have sort of like a double thing here. So it's not just objectification and branding as, you know, say like a car, you also have this other layer of the role that alcohol plays in these sorts of things. And so that needs to be considered as well.
Yeah. So again, it comes back to kind of two things. On the one hand, it's how do you brand your beer in such a way that you're not being a complete asshole, you know, not putting tits in a can, or not, you know, putting sexual innuendo that is not really necessary in a beer there. The other side of it is not speaking at women or marketing directly to them, as in women don't need pink drinks, or women don't need hibiscus in their beer. They don't need for it to be low calorie or light or whatever the case is. You know, you don't, in the same way that men can choose how many beers to drink, and they can choose a light beer, they can choose a full strength beer, they can choose a Belgian quad, or they can choose a lawnmower beer. They can choose whatever they want. I think that's the other side of it, is that if you just get off your high horse and stop trying to make beer for women or beer for everybody else, as in who is everybody else again? Like, that's another kind of way to not be an asshole when it comes to this, you know, especially when it's things like low calorie or light. As much as a lot of people would love for beer not to be as calorie dense as it is, making it lighter is not going to appeal specifically to women. There are also plenty of men who would actually go for that, by the way, and it's the same with pink drinks or whatever the case is. So if you stigmatize pink colors or purple colors or whatever the case is to women, you're also excluding your male market from buying those beers. So either which way, you're excluding somebody. And the only way to get around that is to be neutral and to not sexualize, to not market at people specifically, and to allow everybody to have their own choice. Shitballs.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I like I've bought many a beer that had an awesome pink can design, but not because it was marketed to women. It's because I like hot pink. And so I also like glitter beer. I think it's pretty, but you know, so do men. Like men like pink. Like I really think we need to, you know, as Thandi is saying, like beer doesn't have a gender. And so it's okay to make all of those things, but just don't say, oh, but it's pink, so it's just for women. Just make a pink beer, and if people like it, then it's fine.
And who cares who likes it? You know, we've spoken about this a couple of times before, but it's like, if you're offering beer to people, just ask them what they want, instead of saying, oh, you're a girl, you'd like pink, here, have a pink beer. Fuck that, guys. Like, let's just allow everybody the same choice. You almost wouldn't walk up to a man and say, oh, you have a penis, so therefore you need a Belgian quad. Like, you wouldn't do that. That would be weird. You know, you'd say, hey, what would you like? So how about we just do the same?
Yeah, like let's get away from gender stereotyping. There's absolutely nothing wrong with liking feminine or femininity or stereotypical feminine things like pink. But we really need to get away from putting that into a gender pigeonhole, because there are lots of women who don't want to be feminine. And there's nothing wrong with that. And there are lots of women who love pink, but also, you know, a million other things. And so like, let's treat people as complex beings with their own agency who like a variety of things. And just, you know, market beer to people who like beer.
Yeah, exactly. We're all one big beer drinking community, and there's really no need to divide it in any kind of way. And it just makes it worse. Like, this UK brand that launched with this beer for women, it really kept me up at night, because I just thought, how must you think that this is helping? You know what I mean? Like, the intention seemed good, but how does this help? Like, it doesn't. It just makes it seem as if not everything else is for women.
If you want to lose more sleep, there is a subreddit, /unnecessarily gendered.
Ooh.
It makes me so angry when I read that. But yeah, if you want to go down a rabbit hole.
It's similar to that Reddit that talks about, what is it, men writing women?
Oh yeah,
so funny. I mean, I can only sit and laugh at that, because I mean, it's
you
just
have
ridiculous.
to laugh or else you're gonna cry, because it is.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe one final thing though, because what we were talking about earlier there was, you know, speaking to other people about your design. Like, if you think your design might be on the line between edgy or controversial, you know, and there are such things as pushing boundaries, and you do have creative license, and you do have all of these things, but you know, you kind of have to choose your battles, and you kind of have to choose what you value more. Do you value your right to put tits on a can, even though it's annoying, boring, and harmful, or do you push it out? But if you do have a design, for instance, or a name that you're wondering about, it's kind of one of those things where, again, you speak to a lot of different people And we've said it before on this podcast, actually, Christina. I think you were on that when we were talking to Kelly and Erica about there are women beer societies, or there are beer-loving women societies all over the place. There are also beer-loving people on Twitter, on Instagram, wherever. I feel like talking to people who are not yourself is not hard. And we'll just need to make a better effort of it.
And it's also just doing your research. Like I said, as I said, my frustration with you should know better, because at this point, if you even did a cursory research of either sexist branding or making a beer for women, you would see that they're both bad ideas, and they're both bad ideas that have been repeated over and over again, and people have continually told people that they're bad ideas. So to me, it also says that you haven't done any research.
Yeah.
And so when you're coming and talking to women about this, which again, like I volunteer myself, you can come and talk to me about this before it comes out. But if you do that, you should have done some research prior to that. So you should say, you know what, I've seen this and I've seen this. I think based on this and this, that it's not that. What do you think? You know, don't expect people in marginalized communities or people who might be offended to do all the legwork for you, because that's just not their responsibility. So you have to come in already having done some research. Yeah, absolutely. Katie, have you got anything else there, my friend? Otherwise, we're going to start wrapping up.
I just echo what you two have said already.
Brilliant. We don't need tits on a can. We don't need pink drinks. We just need good beer.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Well then, friends, I think that what we're going to do is start to wrap up. We're going to remind everybody listening at home to please hit us up on social media. Follow us on Twitter at Beer Ladies Pod. We're on Instagram at Beer Ladies Podcast. We're on Facebook even, although I don't know who uses Facebook anymore. Wink, wink. Katie, you're showing your age there, Katie.
I know. I'm the oldest one here today, so yeah.
We're at beerladiespodcast@gmail.com. And please go and subscribe and share and like and leave a review and all of those good things, because that really does help us grow. And I don't think that we're done on this topic, guys, ladies.
I don't think we'll ever be done on this topic.
No.
Wouldn't it be nice if we were, though? Like, wouldn't it be nice if we didn't have to talk about this again?
It would be so nice if this aired and then all of those breweries were just like, oh, yes, you know.
Well, we get it now.
We get it now. We're not going to do this, but, you know, it's not going to happen.
Prob's not going to happen.
And, you know, it's not just in beer. We can talk about what we know, but it's like over at Cheltenham, the great success by the Irish female jockey. And it was on a sports website, and it was like men's sport.
Gross.
Talking about a female jockey. And I'm like, how is that men's sport? That's women's sport, if it's anything, you know? I don't know.
Or here's a radical idea: sport.
Yeah.
Just like beer, we don't need pronouns before that. Anyway, all right, friends, it was wonderful to chat to you today, and thank you everybody at home for listening along and watching along. And we hope to see you next week. All righty, bye guys.
Bye. Bye.